Go to reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. Also, check out the 2024 Reparations Manifestations Planner, available at Amazon. And while you're at Amazon, hit that affiliate link. It's free and helps to support what we're doing. As always, appreciate the support and thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. All right, Miss Jackson, can you say your name, please?
LaVerne Jackson.
Okay, so I'm here with Mrs. LaVerne Jackson. Miss LaVerne Jackson, where are you from?
I'm from Marietta, Georgia.
Okay. I know sometimes young ladies don't like to say their age.
I am very proud to say I am 91 years old.
Mrs. Jackson is 91 years young and looking beautiful as ever. Mrs. Jackson was my kindergarten teacher, and we definitely like to highlight, or at least I like to highlight, the individuals that made me. So I'm very proud and very humbled to have Mrs. Jackson on this platform so she can speak to us not only about her experience, but the experience about the Black community. So, Mrs. Jackson, so you said you were born in Marietta, Georgia. Is that correct?
I was born in Marietta, Georgia in 1933.
1933. Okay. Now, before we actually get into your birth and growing up in Marietta, Georgia, can you tell us a little bit about your parents and like where your parents were from and their experience?
I can. My mother was born in Marietta, Georgia also, but my dad was born in South Carolina, a little town called Pineland, a country town. And so I think he went to Marietta in 1929 to open a high school. It was August 1929. Until then, there was no high school. At that time, we were called the Negroes, for Negroes in Cobb County. I don't remember how many counties are in Georgia, but Marietta was the county seat. And there was, I think, a seventh grade. But there were no seventh grades. I think there were 6. But anyway, I might be mistaken about that, but there was not a high school. So when my dad came to Marietta, he was the first principal of that Black high school. And he retired, I think he was probably 72, 73 years old. My mother was a stay-home mother when I had 2 brothers, and when we were children, she stayed home. But eventually, she did work as an insurance agent. It was a Black insurance agent, of course, from Atlanta, Georgia. So she'd really have to go to Atlanta. There was not an insurance agent for her at that time. So they both lived long lives. My mother was 79 years old when she passed away, and that was about 34 years ago. My dad lived to be 96, and the last 3 years of his life he lived with me here in Sacramento. So I can't say that I miss both of them. At some point every day of my life, I think about them. And I had a good life. My brothers, one was older than I and one younger. My older brother was Marion Jerome Woods. He lived in Sacramento. That's the reason I'm here in Sacramento. I came to visit with them. My younger brother still lives in Marietta, in my parents' home. So what else do I need to tell you?
Okay, no, tell us what you want to tell us. Okay,
Okay,
so
I do know that when my dad came and started the high school, they had their first football team. Uh, but for whatever reason, and I would guess finances or money, uh, that football team didn't last very long. And we didn't have another football team at that school until 1948. And I remember my brother was quarterback on that team. And that was once during that year they allowed us to play against another school that was in the county, out of the county. It was, I think, Cartersville, I believe, but which is a totally different county from Cobb County. They allowed us to play on the white football field under the lights. We had never played under the lights before, so that was interesting. And I think after that they had a football team every year. Then when segregation came about, of course that black school was no longer black school, but children were able. I was gone, of course. I graduated from high school in 1949. I don't remember when the first year that students did go. It was after desegregation that they went to the white schools. I came to Sacramento to visit my brother and his wife. His wife and I met each other when we were 16 years old at Spelman College. And their first child, they named her after me. Her name was LaVerne, so I really came to see the baby. Thought I'd go back in a couple of years because I was teaching in Atlanta, Georgia. But I met this man who became my husband a year later, so I didn't go back. I stayed here. And of course, we have 4 children, all adults, 3 daughters and 1 son, of whom I am so proud, all 4 of them. I have 7 grandchildren. And when I retired, I babysat those children, the joy of my life. The first 5 were daughters, granddaughters, and I babysat them on a daily basis, 5 days a week. But by the time the other 3 came, my son's children, he has 2 boys and 1 girl. But I was not able to babysit them 5 days a week. I just filled in when they needed me most. But that was my joy. It was, before coming to Sacramento, though, after graduating from Tuskegee, Alabama Institute, now it is Tuskegee University, I taught for 3 years at Price High School in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a new school, the first year that they were open, and I was head of the Women's Physical Education Department, which was so much fun for me. I coached the basketball team, girls, and the track team, and of course I taught physical ed, and those were some very memorable days. I will always remember those days. My co-workers, teachers, some of my best friends were at Price High School. And it was until this past year, December of 2023, that one of those ladies that I taught with at Price High School was my roommate in 1949 and 50 at Spelman College. And we had been in touch with each other ever since until she passed away. It was November 23, I think. Could have been December, but I think November 23. And I stayed in touch with quite a few of my Spelman friends, but all of them are gone. They passed away. I don't. There were one of us. Well, we called ourselves the Big Seven, and six of them have passed away. One, she's still alive, but ill, still in Atlanta, Georgia. If I'd walk into her room right now, she would not know me. So I feel so very blessed that I've lived these 91 years, and most of my peers are gone. Um, but I love this life I live. One of my daughters, who is my youngest daughter, lives with me, and I am so proud of that. And my life is such that my eyes are declining. I'm not blind, but I don't see well, don't read anymore. Other than that, I'm pretty healthy. I am very proud to say that, I'm not a medicine taker. I do have a couple of things that I have to take care of, but my health is good. So, Umoja, what else do you want me to say?
That was great. When I do these interviews or discussions, as I like to call them, we just have a conversation.
Yeah.
We talk.
Oh, I do have another thing I wanted to
Yes,
mention.
ma'am.
Of course, as Umoja already told you that I was his kindergarten teacher. Yes, I was. And I became good friends with his family. And his sister was also in my kindergarten class. And, of course, I remained friendly with their mother, Cheryl. And I always enjoyed our conversations. And her husband, Umoja's father, his grandmother, Umoja's grandmother, and I were great friends. She was quite the piano player, and I can remember when she and I played music together. As a matter of fact, she taught me a bit. So we had fun playing the piano. And then we also had fun attending the same social events. I was really sad to see her leave us, but we're not here to stay forever.
Thank you once again for watching this program. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. Let's continue. We are back. All right, to the second or third part, maybe. Okay, so we left off talking about, my grandmother and so forth. I want to, there's a couple questions, but let's talk about teaching, right? And your involvement in teaching. And then I obviously want to talk about my grandmother too. But before we talk about that, can you let us know, because you said your father was involved in education, what inspired you to get involved in education? How'd you lead up to end up becoming a teacher?
Well, if I am being honest, and I hope I am, I think that was probably the only thing that I could do at the time. I taught in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta. Everybody I knew was a teacher. Those were only the jobs that we could get. I think there were doctors, there were black doctors. We were Negroes, I think, then. And then there were beauticians. And, of course, I couldn't do either of those two. And I'm thinking, Umoja, there just weren't that many jobs for us. I do remember that a lot of our male teachers at Price High School, where they'd leave their teaching jobs and go to the post office to work to improve their salary. Because it wasn't a lot of money, but back there in 54, 55, I guess it was probably the most money that most of us could earn. Otherwise, the jobs that we would have would not pay as much.
What types of jobs at that time were available? And this was in Georgia, correct, at the time?
Yeah, this was in Georgia, yes. And When I lived in Marietta, which is not far, it was only about, I think at the time it said 20 miles from Atlanta. And now, of course, it's maybe 15. From city limit to city limit, I think it's 8 hours, 8 miles. But the jobs that other people had, as far as I can remember, um, because we still had a lot of domestic work that people did. I'm sure there um, secretarial jobs, maybe. People worked in the colleges, but not necessarily teachers.
And so, Mr.
Uh,
Jackson, when you mean the colleges, were at the time the colleges, were they segregated?
oh, yes, yes,
Okay.
of course. Yeah, I went to HBCU schools, Spelman and Tuskegee. Oh, those were the schools we could go to. When I lived in Georgia, in Marietta, I mean, Georgia State was right there, but I had to go to Atlanta to go to school.
Mhm.
Uh, there were no colleges in Marietta, Georgia for Negroes. Um, I think there were people who, worked in the colleges in Marietta, and maybe as cooks and custodians and those kinds of jobs. I think the post office, I don't even know if there were any jobs for black people. If so, they probably were cleaning the floors, cleaning. Uh, in Marietta, in Atlanta, though, which was a much uh, larger city, uh, I think they could work with the mail, of course. Maybe, I don't know what the terms were, classify mail, um, but there were no postmen.
Okay.
Um,
So you mentioned Georgia, and so I kind of want to fast forward
mhm.
to my grandmother. So you started there in Georgia, right? So can you, well, I guess it's a two-part question. One, how did you come? I know you briefly mentioned it, but I want to kind of go back to it. So how did you get to California? Because a lot of our, ancestors, what we call the Great Migration, where a lot of black people came to California. So one, how did you get to California? So that's my first question. And then two, how did you end up meeting my grandmother? But I guess first, how did you get to California?
Okay, I do remember the Great Migration, and a lot of my friends at that time, we were children, did come to. Well, I think they mostly went to Chicago, Detroit, but I think a lot of people from Texas, Oklahoma, they came to California. But I ended up coming to California just to visit my brother and his wife. Uh, and after I met this man that I married, I, I stayed here, and I've been here ever since. That was 1958. But I came just for a visit. I thought I was going to go back to Atlanta, Georgia, and teach my physical education students. But when I met John, that changed my mind. I wanted to stay here, and I did get a job teaching here in Sacramento. My first job was a third grade teacher in Del Paso Heights, at Del Paso Heights Elementary School. And I taught 1 year in San Juan School District. It was called the 7th and 8th grade centers, and I taught the 7th graders physical education. Um,
And
and after,
about what year was this,
let's
relatively?
see, it was 1960.
In the 60s? Okay.
Maybe, yeah, it was in the 60s. I think maybe 61
Okay.
when I taught it. It was called Sylvan's 7th and 8th grade center in San Juan District. And I only taught that 1 year, and I had 4 children. After the 4 children, I worked in Sacramento City Unified School District. And I thought, I really do want to be an elementary school teacher now that I have these children of my own. I thought it would be beneficial. So I worked, my first job here in Sac City was, what was the name of that school? I'll have to ask Barbara.
That's okay. We
But,
could just.
um,
Was it an
and then
elementary
it
school
was
or
an
was it
elementary
a
school. I
junior high
taught
school?
first
Okay.
grade there. I think I
Okay.
taught 2 years in first grade and two
Okay.
years in kindergarten.
Okay.
And I did like the kindergarten. So when I transferred from, I've forgotten the name of that school, but I went to Bear Flag Elementary. That's where I met you.
Yeah.
Bear Flag Elementary School. But I taught a third grade there for 1 year, and then they had a vacancy in the kindergarten class. So the remainder of my teaching was in kindergarten at Bear Flag.
Okay.
That's where I retired.
So, in terms of your experience as a teacher, and especially as a black woman, did you face any types of discrimination? And so I want to get to my grandmother. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
But one, did you face any discrimination? And what was did you see any difference in terms of the educational system in the South, comparatively speaking, to the West? So the first question is, your discrimination as a black woman going through the educational system, and then the difference between, the South and the West in terms of the educational system.
Well, I can tell you, Umoya, it's a great difference because you must remember that my teaching, my experience in Georgia was my teaching experience was only with high school. And of course, I never taught in high school here in Sacramento. I taught in elementary schools, that 1 year in the seventh grade. But in terms of discrimination, I don't think I personally was discriminated against, but I could see that things were different.
Did you feel any pay discrepancies at all between the teachers, or do you think it was pretty much fair pay between like the white teachers and the black teachers overall from your experience?
One thing about that at Bear Flag Elementary School, well, and I'm gonna have to ask Barbara the name of that school so I can tell you
Okay.
where it was. But that was a great. We had a great relationship with teachers at that school. In my kindergarten class, she and I taught in the same room, but at the same time. And they had a morning kindergarten class and an afternoon kindergarten class, but we shared the room. That was a good experience. Other teachers at that school, there was no problem. I just can remember once that there were kids who were bused from Glen Elder to this school. Oh, the name of the school was Clayton B. Wire. Finally
Clayton
came to
B.
me,
Wire.
Clayton B.
Okay.
Wire. And so there were kids who were bused from that school. And I remember an occasion when we were having a teachers' meeting, and I think some of the kids who were being bused were behavior problems with some teachers. And in this meeting, we kind of talked about that. And I do remember a teacher saying, well, those children over there, they misbehave and I can't control them. It's not, probably I'm not quoting what was said, but this is the essence of what was being said. So she said, I just leave them alone. Just let them alone. And of course I had to speak up and say, well, if my children were in your class and they were misbehaving, I would want to talk to you. I would want you to let me know. I wouldn't want you to just leave them alone.
And were these predominantly black kids that got transferred from
Yes.
Glen Elders? Okay.
Yes. And of course, at that time, I was the only black teacher at that school. And of course, at Bear Flag, I was the only black teacher at that school for the time I was there. And I don't know, I think before I was there, they had a black teacher. After I left, I don't know, they may have. But I think maybe when I went to Bear Flag, because I was a kindergarten teacher, I didn't have a lot of reasons to, because, we didn't exchange classes, but everybody was always very kind to me until my last year there. And of course, I think it was well known that we did have a problem over there at that school. I don't really think it was me, and because I was black. At that time, I am black now. At that time we were black.
Yeah.
I wasn't a Negro anymore. I was black then. But we did have a problem at that school, and my principal needed for me to go to another class. She wanted me to no longer teach kindergarten. I really didn't want to go to that third grade class, but I thought I should. But the California Teachers Association did inform me that if I should do that, that then I think it was that I didn't have to, because I had already been assigned my kindergarten class, and that the date was too late for me to make a change. Well, I felt that, well, look, I want to always follow the rules, and I do want to always stand up for my own rights. And I do know that every other teacher at that school had been moved around from one grade to another. Many of them didn't like it, so they moved away to other schools. I was determined to stay there, but not in that third grade class. There was no real good reason to move me. And yet I do know that with the credentials, I was capable of teaching anywhere from first to eighth grade, I believe is what at that time. Probably has changed now, I don't know. But I wanted to stay in my kindergarten class, and there was no real good reason to move me. So I don't really think it was me. I don't think I was, they weren't really prejudiced against me, but it was just that principal wanted to move me because for whatever reason, and I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but it was unusual that a principal would come into a school and move every teacher around. Men who taught fifth and sixth grades moved down to second, which was unnecessary. There was another teacher there who had been teaching in that kindergarten class for years. Moved her to another class, and of course she left. Most of them left. They all did. And then in the meantime, when these teachers were being moved around, she hired other teachers to come to that school, and they were students, no experience, of course, but they were college graduates, and this would have been the first jobs for them. I don't want to say this. I think there were at least 8 new teachers who came into those to that school to replace those who had left. And it was my turn.
Thank you once again for watching this program. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. Let's continue.
I decided I'm not leaving. I'm not going to that third grade class. And the reason I made that big decision because I had a lot of support from the community and the California Teachers Association, the Sacramento City Teachers Association. And there was an attorney who lived in that community, was 100% supportive of me. And at the time, there was an organization, BASS, B-A-S-S. They were having a conference in Sacramento. And, of course, my brother Marion Woods at that time was a part of that organization, and he knew what was going on at Bear Flag School with me. And of course, they picketed in front of that school. Um, and so a lot of those men who were there for that conference came out and picketed right along with um, the other teachers who were picketing also at that school on my behalf. And I appreciated that. I was much more comfortable about what was going on because I knew I had a lot of support. And I really wanted to call this man, but I don't know if I should. But I had taught his child also, who was very supportive. He was an attorney, was very supportive of me, gave me a lot of good advice. And of course I took it. But that was a hard year for me. And I retired at the end of that year. Personally, I don't think those teachers were, it wasn't because I was a black person, but it was just a situation.
Okay. All right. Well, I know we don't have a lot of time here, so I'm gonna try to
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna try to get these questions as succinct as possible before we get out of here. So I know my grandmother, or at least my dad, from the story he's telling me, that when she first got to California, that it was very hard for her to find work as a teacher here. So she had to go, and this was like the early 50s, where she actually had to go outside of, I believe, Stockton to find her first job before she actually was able to come here to Sacramento to eventually start teaching here in Sacramento. I just wanted to put that out there on the record, just as saying that it sounds like, eventually as time went on, that it was a little easier for black teachers to get more work here. But I just wanted to put on the record that even though this is California, and just real quick, even with me, I don't think I recall as a young kid having too much discrimination, but I do recall a teacher, and I can't remember her name. I think it was like Mrs. Lake, I want to say, and I think she was a 6th grade teacher. All I remember is that most of the black kids, I don't know, she decided to separate us. One class was on one side, and then the quote smarter kids, and then the ones who were kind of falling back were on the other side of the class, and that's how she separated. And I was on the other side of the class, and the majority of the black kids were on the other side of the class. Not all of us, but majority of us. And I felt, looking back on hindsight, looking back on it, and I'm not saying that it was, racial, but I definitely felt that there was a certain feeling of, I feel denigrated a little bit because it didn't make me feel as smart, because the other kids seemed to have, certain expectations where the other kids who were on the other side were just didn't kind of pay attention to them. And so fortunately I had parents that said, no, you're going to pay attention to my son. Yes. Why is he failing? Why is he doing wrong? So I just wanted to mention that. But can you, Mrs. Jackson, explain how you actually met my grandmother here in Sacramento?
I remember she was here when I got here.
Okay.
And I met her at what's the name of the church where you?
Oh, St. Andrews.
Yes.
I met her at St.
Okay. She was a piano player at that church. But then after I had my children, and my daughter and her daughter were.
Oh, Aunt Cheryl.
No, Brenda, not Barbara. Brenda.
Okay.
Yes, you're Cheryl.
Yeah, my Aunt Cheryl.
Right
okay.
away, I'm thinking about your mother. Yeah.
The other Cheryl. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. They were classmates.
Okay.
And she had a babysitter. I can't remember her name. Well, I had babysitters also, but I'm not sure. I think they were either 3rd or 4th grade maybe. And your grandmother wanted Brenda when her babysitter picked up Cheryl, she wanted to pick up Brenda too and take her home with Cheryl, just so that they could be comfortable to each other. Because prior to that, Brenda was coming home to my house because we had a babysitter also, but I had 4 children. And so she did that, and we just had so much fun. And because she would pick Cheryl up, pick Brenda up, and Brenda would come home and tell me about the fun that she had, and they had a good time. And then there were times when Cheryl would come home to my house with Brenda, and when her mom would come to pick her up, that's when we really had a chance to talk, have conversations. And I remember she would always bring something for my children when she'd come there. And so I would see her church, of course, when I'd go to that church. I didn't belong to that church, but they always had a Black History program, and I would see Monel there. And we were just good friends. And then the club that I can't remember the name of it, but every year...
It might have been the Viola Davis? Was that Viola Davis?
Okay.
Viola Brooks, thank you. Viola Brooks, okay.
Well, I don't remember the name of the club. That may have been the name of the club. But anyway, every year they would have a tea.
Okay.
And a fundraiser, and she'd always invite me, and of course I'd always go. And she asked me to read a poem that I had written called Friendships Forever, and she had a friendship tea that year, and she asked me to come in and read that poem, and of course I did. So, and then, we were at a lot of the same social functions. Yeah. So we had just a lot of time together. And I just admired her so much, I thought she was just a good person. And I never sat in on one of her classes, but I just had that feeling that she's a great teacher. She, of course, was teaching elementary school also. And I did take a few piano classes from her.
Okay.
Yeah,
she's a great pianist.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, she could play that piano.
Yeah, she's a great pianist. Yes. Yeah, I took a couple lessons from my grandmother, and I was very fortunate, to learn from her.
Yes.
Thank you once again for watching this program. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. Let's continue.
Entitled Miss Rosa by LaVerne Jackson. It was December 1st, 1955, and a very special day. Miss Rosa sat in her seat on the bus, and this seat is where she would stay. Unfortunately, she was asked to move, but she ignored the command. She stayed anchored to her seat and decided to take a stand. This small-statured lady, even as she sat, she appeared to be standing tall. She showed this America and the entire world that a change must be made. This is my call. She thought, justice is what we need, so she stayed anchored to her seat. Then she projected her thoughts. Her strength would not face defeat. The deposition of this special lady, so full of love and dignity, made a strong stand to the world. That made life better for you and for me. Her actions spoke to America. She was eminent and clever. From her seat, she taught many lessons. Lessons learned forever and ever. One of the lessons taught so clearly was, you will reap what you sow. Your attitude will follow you wherever you may go. So if you don't like what you reap, then change what you sow. Try using a bright, sparkly justice rake and a beautiful, meticulous freedom hoe. So Miss Rosa remained in her seat and continued to teach America well. She was told that she would be arrested, and she kept her courage even from her jail cell. She was asked if she was tired from working all day and taking up the slack? Her reply was, no, not from working, but I'm sick and tired of moving to the back. We will always remember the woman who sat on the bus, who ignited the flame that started a movement and made life better for all of us. This intelligent, brave, and fearless lady who passed all tests and scored high marks was the most outstanding Miss Rosa M. Parks.
Are you for reparations for black people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, and what does reparations look like to you?
Well, to be honest with you, I am for it. I think because I lived in Jim Crow America, Umayyah, I'm for anything that's going to make things better for African American people. I'm 100% behind whatever is going to make things better for Black America.
All right. Well,
I
thank
don't know
you.
that I answered your question, maybe, but I am 100% for reparations.
You answered it 100%. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
All right. Well, listen, Umayyah, thank you.